CNN exclusive from 4 sources citing the testimony of Deputy Assistant Secretary of State George Kent this week to Congress. They tell us that in January 2019, Rudy Giuliani tried to secure a U.S. visa for Ukrainian Viktor Shokin. You've heard that name a lot now. He was forced to resign in 2016 with the help of the United States for failing to root out corruption. Now, as if the plot were not already painfully clear, President Trump's acting chief of staff admitted to a quid pro quo, and then POTUS and company had him deny it. So we know what happened. The question is, what does it mean? Where do things stand? Let's ask a possible future juror and top Democrat Senate Judiciary member Richard Blumenthal from Connecticut. Always good to see you, Senator. Thank you for joining us, especially on a Friday night.
Thank you.
So, we know what happened. It is inarguably wrong for a number of reasons. You can argue that it is abuse of power. But do you believe that you have reached a point, with all that you have seen to this point, that this is worthy of articles of impeachment and removal?
It is unquestionably worthy of moving forward with impeachment proceedings, as the House is doing. It is unquestionably an abuse of power by the President of the United States, a betrayal of his oath of office. Let's remember, the Commander-in-Chief on that July 25th phone call is pressuring, indeed extorting, to try to sway our democratic process and compromise our democracy. For the Commander-in-Chief to undertake that role and then to engage his personal lawyer, Rudy Giuliani, in the Shokin efforts, in other efforts abroad, and as well as other members of his administration, is absolutely an abuse of power.
So a reasonable Republican is sitting next to you in the Senate, and they say, Senator, I hear you. It was bad. He shouldn't have done it. It's wrong, and I don't like that they denied it, and I don't like a lot of things about it. But to nullify an election, the Founding Fathers wanted this to be such an overwhelming and flagrant wrong that 2 out of 3 of us saw it the same way. And I don't think it's worth nullifying an election with an election right around the corner. It was bad, but, Ukraine's okay. We didn't compromise their efforts versus Russia. In fact, we gave them arms that we haven't even given them in the last administration, and they got the aid, and we've exposed this for what it is. That's enough for me. What do you say?
I say it's not nullifying an election. It's removing from power someone who has abused that power and, in fact, violated the Constitution. That's the reason that the founders had the impeachment process, because they wanted to protect our republic. Remember Benjamin Franklin's admonition, it's a democracy, a republic, if you can keep it. And the only way for us to discharge our obligation as senators is to protect our democracy against that kind of abuse of power. And again, it's the president's own words, Chris, in that July 25th conversation. Do us a favor. He wasn't talking about a quid pro quo to benefit the United States of America. It was to benefit him personally, his political position. And what we're seeing more and more, of course, is that he wants favors from foreign leaders to benefit his personal financial situation.
So now we're at the end of the week. That's the state of play with the president. With his attorney, what do you think the likelihood is that Rudy Giuliani gets indicted?
Well, there is mounting evidence, and I'm obviously not in the prosecutor line of work, which I was once. I did these kinds of cases, not exactly prosecuting a president's personal lawyer, but what we're seeing here is potential conspiracy to solicit and pressure a foreign leader to provide political campaign help. That's a violation of federal law. Lying to the federal government, tax or bank fraud violations.
You're worried about the money coming in and out from these 2 who were indicted and the other names that are getting listed?
Exactly right. The associates, they are Giuliani associates who have been indicted and charged, certainly could be involved in a conspiracy involving Giuliani and others in the Trump administration. Remember, in Watergate, Nixon was pardoned, but the president's men went to jail. And my guess is that we're going to be seeing cracks in that wall, so far impenetrable wall.
What would you do if the president came out tomorrow and said, I don't like the way this is going. I pardon Rudy Giuliani right now for anything that he did in connection to what I did in Ukraine, anything to do with Turkey, even the bird, even around Thanksgiving. You cannot go after Rudy Giuliani for anything. There's a chance that could happen.
It would spark an uproar an outrage. And I believe, talking about sitting next to a reasonable Republican, that my colleagues on the Republican side at some point are going to have to look to history. They will be haunted by this era if they fail to do the right thing. And clearly the right thing would be to stop a pardon. The president has very broad power, but Congress has some power to override it. And certainly the president has no power to pardon for a state crime,
right,
which then there could be a prosecution to do. And finally, I would say that kind of pardon itself might be an impeachable offense. And my Republican colleagues are going to have to regard this time in history as one that will follow them throughout their lives and through history beyond it.
You know, one simple problem I haven't heard discussed yet is that Mr. Giuliani says that he represents the president pro bono. If that's true, and we have no reason to believe that it isn't, I haven't seen any proof otherwise, is a president or any official allowed to accept that kind of dollar value in pro bono service work from an attorney? And I've been looking through the law, and you guys have all these rules in Congress about it having to be for a committee and a specific purpose and a specific amount. Unless you accept the argument that Mr. Giuliani's legal advice is worth zero, this is hundreds of thousands of things, wouldn't it, of value, wouldn't it have had to have been recorded?
Well, some might question whether Rudy Giuliani's legal advice at this point is worth what others might regard, but the point is that those services, if they are a gift or if they are in exchange for something, could well be a violation of law.
You want to add using Doral for the G7 to your emoluments suit. The president's proxy, his acting chief of staff, says he's not going to make any money off it. It is the best place for it, so there is no issue.
Our emoluments lawsuit says that the president repeatedly and consistently throughout his term of office has accepted payments and benefits from foreign governments in violation of the premier anti-corruption clause in the United States Constitution. The reason for that clause, as you know, is that one of the founding fathers' greatest fears was, in fact, that the president or some other member of the executive branch would be beholden, would take favors from a foreign government. And here is a classic textbook example of the violation of that emoluments clause. So we are definitely going to add it in our brief to be submitted this coming week. But even if there's no profit, there's clearly a payment or benefit, because at that time of year, as you heard earlier during Anderson Cooper's show, the Doral probably is going to be largely deserted. Mm-hmm. The profits or financial situation of that hotel have declined sharply, as the Washington Post recently reported, by 70%. And even if there is no payment, and there will be payment, there is benefit in terms of the promotion of the property. And that is of inestimable value. Think of the impact of having that brand shown all over the world, literally, all over the world, and in effect, an advertisement unpaid for by any Trump entity, but of tremendous benefit to the Trump organization, which this president still owns. He's never divested a single cent worth of that property.
Some heady efforts to come. Senator Blumenthal, thank you so much for joining us. Always a pleasure to have you on the show. Have a good weekend, sir.
You too.
Appreciate it.